Yeah, so just before you start the agenda, so we can stick to it, is events management changes, Bowden, which is your thing, and then release feedback. So I think we've covered all that we're going to do, but if anybody wants to bring up anything else, I'm sure everybody would appreciate it. And do we have anybody, so on the agenda as well, sort of as a different point, is the dress code for avatars, custom avatars with clothing and accessories. Do we have any rules around that that we want to, or guidelines around that that we want to present to the community right now? Gotcha. Yes. Well, I only have the one outfit in my closet, so unfortunately, I'm not a super great example. Um, Uh, that's right. Okay, so unless anybody else has something to say, I think we've kind of gone back over our primary agenda, but I think it's feedback time. How do we want to run that? Go for it. Let's go over all the features. That's right. How could we do this to you?
I'm starting to put questions in here. Go ahead.
What?
I'm starting to put questions in here. Scroll down. Can you go to edit mode? Scroll down. Yeah, you'll start seeing mine.
Okay, cool. Thanks, man.
I think that one stretch might be answering that one.
Trying to just take your head off. You're losing your gourd, I believe, is the. I'm sorry. Okay, great. Yep, looking for the next question here. Sorry, dealing with a sound issue for our people on Twitch, so I'm going back and forth. Okay. The next question. Will the people window be fixed? It does not remember where it was, the position, and whether or not it was open. Okay. All right, then. So we don't know the answer to that yet. The next question, a bit of a long stretch and probably won't happen, but I wonder if you'll be able to simulate standard non-MD clothing eventually. It would be extremely beneficial for custom avatars or those that might not fit standard male clothing. So the question is, will we be able to simulate standard non-MD clothing? All right, we're going to take a 2-minute break until we know if that's clear. Thanks for being patient with us all.
Said you had a couple little things, or is that?
Well, I mean, they're all along the lines of like making it easier to reassign textures and such.
Okay.
And I think we cover that.
Okay, great. Okay, bam, Galileo.
Sounds like Galileo's having some audio issues, so I'll just scroll back in chat and make sure that we're looking at the next questions. Will we be able to have swim animations in the future?
So,
you can do an emo right now, but you mean like going into an actual trigger volume, kicking off a different swim, like in here?
Yes. Swim. So, ideally, like we're gonna have we added jump, and we're adding crouch, and what we want to get to is having some base level functionality that every avatar can use and every scene can rely on when they're building their scene. So get a baseline of functionality that every scene can rely on, and new users can rely on, and it's easy to pick up. I don't know if swim is going to be in that bucket, or if we'd like to get to the point, obviously, where we associate animations with things in the scene. And so, a trigger volume that you entered into in the pool would hopefully have a swim animation set associated with it that allows you to swim. And that's, I think, whether the swim is going to be a first-class functionality or whether it's going to be in that vein is a question. But that's where I'd like to get to, is because we're not going to be able to make every sort of interaction. We need creators that are going to make cooler stuff than we could ever make, probably. They are going to do that, not probably. And so that's one of the things. It's like, if I'm going to have a sword sharpen animation, or in my experience, I'm able to sharpen a sword, we're not going to have that as first class functionality. So we need the ability for creators to associate animations with things in their scene so that those get picked up into the character's graph, and then they can play those animations at the appropriate time. When you go and interact with the whetstone, you'll play the sword sharpening animation. And so maybe swim fits into that bucket.
All right. Next one, I think, Alex, this one might be good for you. It seems Sansar has a lack of repeat visitors issue, which is why the quest system was introduced. But how do you expect people would make experiences that incentivize visitors to come back without these experiences having the ability to remember them? A local persistence question. Apart from the social hub, I have never visited any experience more than once so far, and no amount of interactivity gave me any reason to come back.
Well, firstly, you can create a system that remembers people without local persistence. People have already done it. That's not to say it's the easiest way to do things. Secondly, the plan is that we keep developing this questing system and give you creators the tools to create your own quests and associate your own rewards that you can give out to people for completing your quests. So ideally, you're creating entire quest lines and trees and awarding people for coming in and exploring your content. So that's kind of how we're planning to do that for the short term. But then also getting back to the question of local persistence. It's a good question. I don't have a TBD for you at this point, but it's definitely still on the radar for us for something that you guys want and something that'll make building things easier.
Yeah, I mean, I know that in SL, like the pets and feeding the pets is big, and I know that, like, I play some like card games online, like Hearthstone and stuff, and so those daily quests and coming back, I think it's really powerful, and that's what we're trying to get to. So.
And when can we expect the first abilities to access the code that you've created so that we can tie into it?
Sometime in the next few releases.
Like, we're trying. Is it the next release or the next 2 releases?
Next few.
Few. Okay, it's definitely a goal. So. Yeah. Okay. Galileo, are you back? We've been talking about this as we work on the next version of the default avatar. A lot of our stuff is going to be bone-based. We are going to have blend shape support. Obviously, we have blend shape support now, and we'd like to expose that to users. Ideally, I think, we'd want it to make it. We want to make it easy to import custom avatars. We want to make it easy for people to edit those avatars potentially. Maybe some avatars are editable, maybe some aren't. Blend shapes is one path on that. The problem with blend shapes and some of the clothing and accessories and things is that blend shapes can, without the bones morphing stuff, if you have stuff skinned to the bones, it's trickier to get the blend shapes to work well with worn things. And so that's why we're kind of going with more of a bone approach. And so, yeah, I mean, we'd like to get to having blend shape support. Like I said, working on the bone deformation work, and as part of that, we're hoping to expose more of the stuff that we're doing. So. Swimsuit or
I think this is the
underwear?
The built-in underwear we have, yeah.
Yeah, built-in underwear.
It would be nice.
Yeah, what were you saying?
It would be nice if it was at least nice-looking underwear.
That's true. That's true. Yes, underwear.
Smaller,
right,
nicer
looking product here.
least.
Stanley, do you want to talk about underwear? Do you want to talk about women's underwear?
Not usually. Just be aware where we know the ask, and we'd like to be able to give people freedom to design whatever clothing they'd like, but we also want to make sure that as we're trying to make Sansar a product that we can also share with partners, that they are not scared off by too much freedom in especially clothing around modesty or nudity or things like that. So yeah, we're trying to find that fine line. I can't promise anything, but we know that people are asking for it, and it's something that we've certainly talked about amongst the team.
And it kind of goes back to MedHugh's thing as well, which is if we do have just custom texture support, then you can just change out the body to, you take our body and you can put on whatever underwear you'd like using the, if we have skin support. And so maybe the long-term solution to that is for us to have ugly underwear, but then, or we should make the underwear look nicer for sure, but not to just keep ugly underwear forever, but is to do what Menti was talking about and expose those textures so that it's people can upload the skin texture with whatever underwear they'd like. I think that we're going to keep the baked-in underwear, at least on the default app for the foreseeable future. But I think the long-term solution is to have people upload their own skins, and then people can put whatever underwear they want.
Yeah, it's certainly not something that we're going to enable for new users who just want to grief other people by running around naked. But if people want to customize their own tasteful style of clothing by using the tools we give them, like that will probably be a possibility.
Yeah, definitely people could just upload custom avatars that are naked now and grief around. So we're not stopping anything by having it be textures, right? Because people could just take our model, put whatever texture on they want now, upload it, and then run around naked. So I think that the long-term plan is to do something what Medhu's talking about with the texture as a resource, or skins as a resource. So. Mm-hmm. In the future, yes. And like I said, blend shape support is something we're looking at too. But definitely arbitrary skeletons is something we're going to do. And when we do the switch over from the current base avatar, hopefully before this too, but we knew that definitely when we do the switch over from the base avatar to the new base avatar, we're going to be retargeting. We're going to be using some runtime retargeting technology to make sure all the animations get retargeted over and stuff like that. So it also will allow us, when we do that, it'll also allow us to retarget male and female animations. So hopefully we can kind of maybe get rid of that division as well, where you have to make an avatar animations for a particular skeleton. So if we can do this retargeting, I mean, it will look better if you make an animation for a particular skeleton, but it will look fine most of the time. The big thing with retargeting is often like end effectors. So if you have like an eat animation where you're putting your hand to your mouth, then it looks good. It'll look good for when you're making it for, but then the end effector might be slightly off depending on arm length or some other stuff if you retarget. So they'll look pretty good, especially dances and stuff that don't rely on the end effector so much. So that should be good. But retargeting is a good solution, and so we're going to get towards that. Yeah.
The challenge with arbitrary skeletons and things that are far from humanoid is they tend to not work well with clothing and that kind of thing. And so if it gets too jumbled, then it becomes hard to know what clothes are going to work on what avatar. So long term, we also want to work on a try before you buy system so that you can see in advance of buying something whether it will work on your avatar or not. But that's not going to be for a while. But it is on the roadmap.
Need some clothing on that avatar, Silas. You need some clothing. I'm very offended.
I feel related.
I have a clothing. That's why I'm waving, because it's wearing
It's wearing clothing?
suit. Yeah.
That's
it's
clothing?
yeah.
Oh, it is clothing. That's amazing.
Right.
That's awesome. It's very alien. Yeah, and MD, I think us choosing MD and then having
MD clothing, it
transformation.
works.
Yeah,
Look.
and then having like transformations for, when we have the transformation ability where people can scale up and line up that neck hole, line up those armholes, we should be able to put that shirt on a dog, like a four-legged thing. You buy a shirt at the marketplace, you can put it on your dog. And that's...
I'm a four-legged thing.
It's true. It's working. But, if we can get it to easier, I'm sure you had to pick and pull and drag and get that thing for a while to get that on there.
It's fun.
It's fun. Especially in VR, by the way.
It takes time, but it's fun.
But yeah, we're going to try and make it easier. And so it'll still take time. You still have to pick and pull if you want to get that shirt on that dog. But... it'll hopefully be easier. Yeah, exactly.
What are those legs you speak of? I don't get it.
They don't need pants. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. All right. Next question. Cable. Stanley.
It is not a priority for us at the moment to create private experiences for whatever reasons. I don't think we are taking it off the table. We just have it's not something that we're addressing at the moment. But if it's something that's very important to you guys, please let us know. But no, right now we are not planning for that.
Yes. So next, over the next two releases, we're going to be pushing some more features out for avatars. Like I said, the scaling thing for MD clothing. Also, full body trackers on the VR side of things. So you'll have the puck for the hip and the feet. So it's going to be really awesome. We actually have that's mostly done at this point for the next release. But the guy who's working on that, next task for him is going to be uniform scaling. And so we're pushing for it for the next release, but it might slip into the win after that, depending on how much work it ends up being for getting MD clothing to work because if you scale in the avatar, we're gonna have to like make sure we scale up inputs. And there's some work to do around in the editor for some of the simulation stuff, and then in the world for sit points and control input. All needs to take into account that scale and work properly for it. But yes, uniform scale. It's going to be great, and it's coming soon. I feel like you gotta do that. You know that Christmas card in the office where it's like, all right, everybody on 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, all right, that was not at the right time. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Did we take a picture? Did someone take a picture when someone? Well, the problem is that we're in the U.S. Some of these people are in Europe. Some of these people are in.
So it'll be a wave.
So it might be a wave.
You have to line up in order of geography and then jump, and it should be a wave.
Plus, my voice has to get to you at the speed of light. Is always a problem. But was there a picture? Let's say there are more questions.
Well, it's not really a strafe off toggle, but yeah, you'll have an option to change between like turn and strafing, and we're working on. Well, we'll be getting in some different control modes basically. So right now you're using tank steer effectively from your VR. A lot of people like HMD forward always. Some people like controller forward always, and there's some nuances between each of those. So we're investigating and looking at providing you guys those types of options.
I don't think we've covered that. We probably should.
It's not a me. It's somebody, Bowden, who's in charge of.
Yep.
Is Bowden still here? Are you in charge of Atlas?
No, I'm going to be making changes to it. I don't know who's in charge of it, but I'm going to be screwing with it over the next month, so I'm happy to talk about it if people have questions.
Yeah, you should be a little more diplomatic here, Bowden. We are working diligently.
Yes,
we're sprucing it up. We're making it better.
Yes. Sure. Okay. So the changes are being brought about for two reasons. One is we realized the Atlas design needed some updates. So one of the updates is going to be changing the text and not overlaying that on top of an image that you may or may not be able to read. So that's one kind of minor change that should improve quality of life. The second change is going to be bringing events back to the Atlas. So at the moment, events or things that are created with the event system won't be on the Atlas until after R32. So that will be coming back. There are a couple other minor changes in terms of just unifying some UI, especially on the event side. We're also entertaining the idea of bringing over events into the Atlas. So instead of just keeping those completely separate panels, maybe having content discoverable in one location versus multiple locations. So yeah, we're playing around with some ideas. They're still experimental, but those are the main changes that we're thinking about bringing back.
It's not an immediate priority for the near future, and I don't really have a good answer for that question beyond that right now. Sorry.
I can say we've talked a lot about it internally. It's just going to take a lot of work to get done. We have designed our systems so that we can do that project in the future, and we're excited to do it. It's just not an immediate term thing, so it'll probably take us a while to get to that project, and it's going to be a complex project, but it's definitely something that we're interested in doing eventually.
I can answer this one, Bowden. So yeah, the stuff Bowden was talking about was primarily about events changes and just making it more readable. Long term, we do believe, like the way the Atlas works now, which is just it's a list of stuff that might be organized somehow, or just from the appearance of someone who may not know it. It looks like there's some populated ones at the top, and otherwise it's sort of just like a list of stuff. We definitely want to make it more usable. Categories is something we're thinking about. So we don't have final plans yet, but know that we're not happy with how the Atlas is currently used, especially for new users who just kind of don't really know how to browse properly or find exactly what they want or what might match their interests.
We can do like Netflix. Is it the plan?
No comment
Atlas
if we're
Netflix?
doing
Okay.
Netflix. I will share, like we just ran some. We brought in a bunch of users into in-house and had them go through our Sansar for the very first time, and these are people who are familiar with VR, and we learned a lot from them, and especially around the Atlas of how people browse the Atlas, especially when they're just joining Sansar for the first time. So categories are a great idea, and we definitely like to do something like that in the future.
There's a color picker for skins. Go try it out. You can make yourself into a green alien person. It's gonna be great. It's amazing. I mentioned it briefly at the start, but thanks to a lot of creators out there, we've put some of the free creations into the starter avatar selector. I mean, a lot of people here probably don't go through that flow because they already have avatars. But for new users coming in, you're presented with some custom avatars to select from, and you can choose to go and make it from a default avatar. So lots of crazy stuff. Hopefully we're seeing a big uptick in the number of custom avatars being used, which is great. I think it gives a big variety, and I think it points people more to the store. So we're trying to get people more to interact with the store. So I think that's really great. Yeah, I'm looking at text here. Yeah, so. There's one here from Candy Brains. Are we able to get skin color picker for custom avatars? And I'd like to do that. So I did the custom avatar dressing work, and there's a little bit extra work to get the skin tone stuff to work for the custom avatars, and I didn't make it in. So I'm gonna try. I'd like to come back to that and make it so that you can, specify this if you name the material in some way, kind of like how hair works now. I think for hair, if you name the material in a certain way, then you can get access to the color picker for it. I think we're going to do probably the same thing with nails and skin, I think would be good. And that way, if you name things a certain way, you could have tintable layers between those two settings. I think in the long term, having nails and skin keywords is not great, but it might be a way for us to access that in the short term. So
yeah, I think it will be important maybe to have some masking for that. Like if you do have a color change feature, it's so destructive otherwise. But if you're just tinting, and you go from a Caucasian avatar with makeup, and you blend like black in, and you don't have a mask, then you lose all the vibrancy in the makeup.
Yes. I think that's where we're going to come back to having those texture layers. And get those texture layers for us. That way you're tinting the base layer, or we have different skin tones for the base layer, and then the makeup and the freckles and everything would go on top of that, and not it could either be tinted independently or doesn't get tinted by the underlayer. So, or would get tinted by the underlayer only through alpha.
Awesome.
The tinting also doesn't work great if you're using the subsurface scattering shader.
Yeah, we know that too.
That's something that we know and
that's why
we'll be looking into.
Going more towards like what Mehdi was saying with the UVs, the skins. That'll help us also with the subsurface scattering shader. So.
Another question in chat. Traskin says, I heard at the start something about object scaling. Would this be bone animation scaling or just object scaling? I think we were talking about the
uniform scaling? We're talking about uniform scaling for avatars? Uniform scaling for avatars is going to be scale the whole avatar. So clothing, the animations, everything. We still have an open question. Maybe this is something we can throw out here to the creators here, which is if I scale my avatar, should and maybe this is a choice on a per scene basis, but should I also scale my movement? Because right now, like if you scale the avatar down, you're going to be, if you're shorter, you're going to be slower. If you're taller, you're going to be faster. Just because of the way that works. We could speed up the animation, so you'd like run super. Like if you're small, you go the same speed as a normal size avatar, but your legs would move super fast. And if you're tall, then you're going to be lumbering and slow, and you'll move the same speed as a normal size avatar. And also, there's the collision question, which is if I scale down my avatar, should I be tiny? Does that break certain experiences because I can get into areas I wasn't supposed to get into? If I'm tall, I can't get through doorways. That could break some experiences too, but I kind of have that feeling where it'd be like, oh, if I'm tall and I crouch down, then I can get through this doorway. So, it's maybe something we need like as a flag where it's like maintain avatar.
Giant's problem, right? Like if you want to be a giant, then.
But then no one will be a giant. But then no one will be a giant because they can't access certain experiences. Maybe.
Whichever you choose will create new possibilities.
That's true. And maybe we need a flag where it's like maintain avatar speed. Like, if you have a race game or, something, then giant avatars have a huge advantage and short avatars have a disadvantage. And so maybe it's something where it's like maintain physical attributes of avatar or something like that. That's a flag that you can set on your experience if you're making a race. If you're making a social experience, maybe it's great that short avatars are slow and giant avatars are fast and the collisions are different. If it's like any type of game experience, you might want to maintain those things.
We'll have Speedy Gonzalez.
Exactly.
If we know size and size is like a standard, then we could say that avatars under this size can't play this game.
Yeah.
We could put that in the code.
I kind of feel like it's better just to like maintain. Oh, I just punched my computer. If we had some like. We'll sort it out, I think. But that's kind of the thing with the uniform scaling. But I think it's going to be great, too, because what we're doing is we're going to scale the world to make the world feel giant as well when you're short. I'm really excited about this. And when you're big, we'll scale the world to make it feel like you're small, so like a Godzilla. I don't know how big we're going to put the limits at, but I think it's going to be really fun. So like flip the avatars upside down, or just accessing it so that they jump higher and
well, that would
sideways.
Allow for first moving in 0G.
Yes.
Second, creating jetpacks, and third, creating areas with custom gravity, maybe even inverse gravity.
Yeah.
And that would allow for lots of interesting stuff.
Yeah. I know that in our code in some places that we kind of assume a certain up vector, and so it's going to be a little more work to get that to work in terms of like flipping you upside down. I do think though that we should have things like you being able to, for instance, set the jump strength or extra velocity on the fall of the jump, or being able to control maybe the vector of the avatar if they let you control their motion vector. So things like jetpack, cannonball, things where we want to drive you physically, kind of like what we're doing with jump now, where once you take off, you're kind of driven physically instead of through the animation. And so jump kind of has that. So
use case would be swimming in deep water. So right now,
you're kind of
gravity, we cannot go up and down.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. So controlling the avatar's movement vector more is kind of in line, would kind of get you some of the way there. the flipping of the gravity is probably a long ways off, actually. But controlling the up-down value of the velocity on a per character basis, or controlling the setting that is definitely more doable, because the characters actually have their own gravity setting. So I think right now it's taken from the world, but it's something we could, I think, set arbitrarily. So something for us to think about. Yeah.
Possibilities. Thank you.
Yeah, the Mars one right now is pretty fun. If you go into Mars, lower gravity is pretty fun. It's like, I want to be able to, right now, I want to be able to jump on top of this thing. Jump. Do it again. Yes. I mean, the reason that we've made that choice in the short term was to try and limit our exposure in terms of, right now there's an absolute cap on the number of polygons that an avatar will have, because you limit the number of pieces of clothing, we limit the number of polygons that clothing can have, and so there's an absolute cap. If we let people have arbitrary number of clothing, then this is how we dealt with that problem in the short term. We have some other ideas for how to deal with that problem, which then, we've talked about them here, which is like doing more of a weighting system, so that you're allowed a certain polygon weight, or a certain texture weight along with that, and so that would allow us to have an arbitrary number of clothing, but you have to stay under a certain poly count. And that's one solution we've been talking about, but we haven't had action on that.
I think it's mostly about textures ultimately.
It is a lot about textures, a lot about polygons, especially for lighting and stuff where you have like shadow casting and stuff too. But
LOD is around the corner.
LOD is around the corner, so maybe it's something we can look at once we have LOD as well. So the LOD system.
We have no limits on textures right now on an
I know.
avatar, do we?
I know.
Right.
Yeah,
it's bad.
It's a problem.
It's a real problem.
Yes.
Birdman is going to kill me. Yeah.
Yeah, especially because we're trying to figure out how we can support more avatars in an instance. And so trying to limit both polygons and textures in some ways to make sure that Sansar can still perform reasonably is a big challenge on our performance team right now.
Yeah, and so LOD is part of that.
LOD is around the corner. I've heard less data on from 2 meters. It looks like getting roughly from 60,000 to 20,000, and you won't be able to tell the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously even less on further distances, but we'll see when we're done. But then textures, as soon as you then scale up the number of concurrent users, texture and texture memory becomes the big problem.
Yep.
And swapping becomes, really problematic. So then how do we manage that? And there's more tech you can do with virtual texturing text and stuff, but that's another big project in of itself.
Totally.
So then we also discussed, should there be maybe, even for certain experiences, being able to dictate how heavy an avatar or what specific avatar you can even be to come in there. So if you want to have a really large gathering, you could say, like, you can pick one of these 3 stick figures. They weigh 1 ounce each, and we can get hundreds of people in here. And then it comes, the amount of data we send with all this stuff going on. So there's always these limits we keep trying to figure out.
We get to one limit, and then we got to get to the next limit for the next system that becomes a problem, and that's kind of development in general.
Really quickly, there was a question about Oculus Quest and what will we do in the future if Quest outnumbers PC VR headsets. Ebe's here if he wants to speak to that, but we don't have plans to go on Quest at the moment, but we're always considering this.
They're great PC games and they're great mobile games, and we're a PC game for long foreseeable future until mobile performance and Sansar performance at some magical point in the future will intersect where it makes sense. If we were to do a Quest version of Sansar, A, we got to do a lot of work to just get to that platform, and then B, a lot of the content and all these conversations you had about, can we have more stuff in our avatars and more, like, everything would have to be less by a lot. You have to simplify everything, and so the richness we currently have in Sansar, there is no way anybody could get something this large and rich with this many users, with this much polygons and vectors and textures happening in Quest. So it'd be a radically different experience. So we figured we'll keep pushing to make sure we're a great PC and PC-based VR before we even consider mobile. And then if mobile, maybe it's streaming mobile, but you can't do streaming VR no matter what. So you kind of almost have to design a different platform, different game, or have severe restrictions of what content is allowed for those types of mobile VR experiences. I think Quest will be great, but it's kind of like you don't like do Photoshop on your iPhone, do you? I mean, it's just some apps just don't make sense in certain form factors.
Thanks for that, Epic.
We can pass that question on to the render team. I don't think we have anyone here who can answer that immediately.
Totally. Ooh.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Twitch chat. See ya.
Bye, Twitch.
Ciao.
Is the stream
Is it
on?
top 5 now?
Yeah, top 5.
All right. Top 5 it.
Yay.
I have a question, but I didn't want to ask it on the stream. Is it